Welcome to the Richmond Events podcast, where we take you inside the UK's most exclusive business forums. You'll get to meet the delegates, suppliers and speakers shaping their industries. Richmond Events, this is where business gets done.
Hello and welcome to the Logistics and Supply Chain Forum here at Richmond Events. I'm joined by Victoria. Victoria, welcome.
Hello.
So Victoria, tell us the business that you're a part of, your role, and what's brought you along to the event today.
So I work for Illumina, and we're a genomics company, so we produce instruments and consumables for genetic testing. I am the Director of Supply Chain, and so I look after the European region, all things supply chain, operations, purchasing, planning, etc., etc. And I've just come along today to really talk about risk, I think, was the main thing that we were talking about in our session.
Incredible. So you've actually been facilitating one of the talks today. When you say talking about risk, what was involved then? What was the conversation about?
It was talking a lot about how geopolitical, times have changed and what resilience now is happening, or what we're having to have as resilience in an organisation within a supply chain. Is it still about efficiency? Is it still about a price? How does BCP look like? So the business continuity planning. How do you set yourself up to make sure you're secure within your supply chain? Those sorts of things.
See, it's funny you mentioned the word resilience. It's a word that's kept cropping up today when we've said, what's one word that you would say we need for the supply chain this year? Resilience is that word.
Yeah.
And do you think the geopolitical side of things is the biggest reason that you need that?
I think, so if we look at, humans, companies, the world today, I think resilience is certainly coming up more, because if I look at my employees, my team, they have a certain amount of resilience within them, and they're working and there's this pressure on work, and then they've got all this other stuff going outside of work, whether there be a conflict over here or conflict over there, and them as a person, they're building resilience on that. So there's an element of people resilience, and then I think company resilience comes in as well, because the dynamic is different, the world is different, and we've got things popping up that weren't something that we had planned for. No one had thought the Strait of Hormuz was going to be, under this control and you couldn't get your shipments in and out, and that there was going to be an extra, few thousand added onto your shipments as danger money, things along those, those kind of lines. So the logistics element now, it used to be supply. We were always talking about, can I get my goods in? Now it's, can I get my goods out as well? Can I get my goods to my customers? Can I get my goods that I've manufactured? So I think it's a different space, and I think that's what's making us think resilience more and more and more than we used to ever.
How do you manage risks or foresee those sort of risks? Sometimes they are repetitive risks where you're like, okay, this happened here, but it kind of happened there too. But then there's a lot of new risks, and okay, it was 6 years ago, but COVID was one that kind of threw a right spanner in the works. Yeah. How do you manage those risks?
I think you have to have an agile supply chain. That's what we talk about a lot now, because you're not going to be able to predict everything. There's indicators. So I was going to say you couldn't have predicted what happened in the Middle East, but I'm sure loads of people would say you knew it was heading for a conflict, but what the impact of that conflict has on you as a company and your supply chain, you can't predict. So I think you have to, when you're setting up the supply chain, you're looking at whether it be contracts, how you're getting your goods around the globe. How do you how do you think forward as much as possible to what can happen? Now, you can predict to a certain point, but there will always be something that you didn't think about. It's like if you've ever managed a project, you'll be going, I think I've got all bases covered because this is similar to this project. I've done that, I've learned from that. And then boom, there's this last thing that will come and bite you. And that's, you just cannot cover everything. There's tools out there that you can use to look at risk in, certain categories, certain commodities. You look at geopolitical risk, you can manage all of that. So you can see for a certain point, but the actual true impact, you're never going to be 100%.
What would you say would be the biggest takeaway from your discussion you had today?
My biggest takeaway from my discussion today, actually, yeah, my biggest takeaway today would be that there is still a lot of emphasis on the relationship between a supplier and a buyer. So even though we're in a different world where things become commodity driven, it's still about the relationship to whether you will get a proactive call from your supplier to kind of say, hey, this is coming, build up some stock, blah, blah, blah. Because once you're in that reactive state, then I don't think your relationship's really going to get you out of the poo. But yeah, there is still a lot of emphasis, I'd say, on the relationship.
And what would you say would be the importance of events like this, bringing all these supply chain leaders together?
I hope learning. So going to certain events where you can learn. And I think the panel discussions that we're in today, where you have different views and perspectives, I think is probably nice for the audience because they know that it's not one way and you have to operate like this. It's understanding that your business has a certain requirement. Make sure you know what those requirements are. Make sure you know what the problem is for your business. And then you've got your different tools in your toolbox that you can fit for this. So that's what I would hope people get out of this. I know some people come to these events and it's networking and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I think it's more the learning from others, and you don't need to walk away with this massive list of learning. It might just be one light bulb moment that you can then take back and drive change into your company. For me, that's certainly what I like out of these.
Love that. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
You're welcome.